Donald Trump is having an absolute meltdown after the Supreme Court smacked down his global tariff scheme as unlawful. Trump didn't reflect, he didn't pause, he didn't say maybe I should follow the law. No, he immediately came out and said, fine, I'll do it another way. And buried inside this tantrum, inside the revenge policy spree, is a story that should make every single American furious. Because up to $175 billion in tariff may now have to be refunded, but not to you, not to the families who paid higher prices, not to the people who absorbed inflation, but to corporations, to shareholders, to the same people who already won. And I want you to really sit with that. So what just happened? Basically, Trump used a law called the International Emergency Economic Power Act to impose massive tariffs on imports from countries all over the world. That law was never meant for this, it was designed for targeted emergencies, sanctions, asset freezes, specific threats. And the Supreme Court finally said, no, you don't get to do this. They ruled that Trump exceeded his authority, that Congress, not the president, controls tariffs of this magnitude, and that this was a major question with enormous economic consequences. Translation, you broke the law. So those tariffs, they are void. And when something is void, that opens a very uncomfortable question for the government. What happens to the money? Now the $175 billion problem. Where does the $175 billion number come from? When Trump imposed those global tariffs, importing companies had to pay a tax to the US government, and every time goods crossed the border. Over time, that added up to roughly $100 to $175 billion, depending on which tariff survived legal review. Now the Supreme Court says the president didn't have the legal authority to impose many of these tariffs. In legal terms, that means those tariffs may be void. And if a tax is void, the people who paid it can legally say, you took my money without authority, give it back. And that's why analysts say $100 to $175 billion is exposed to refunds. Who technically paid the tariffs? On paper, importers paid the tariff at the border. Companies like Walmart, suppliers, electronic importers, etc. That's why they are the ones legally eligible to demand refunds. And this is important. The government only refunds money to whoever wrote the check. Consumers never wrote that check. The simple analogy that makes it click. Imagine this, the government puts an illegal tax on fuel distributors. Gas stations raise prices to cover it. You pay more every time you fill up your tank. A year later, a court says that fuel tax was illegal. So what happens? The government refunds the fuel distributors. Gas stations don't lower past prices. You don't get money back for all those expensive fill-ups. You paid more at the pump, they get the refund, and that's tariff. You don't get your money back, and that's exactly what's happening at a national scale. Why this makes people furious? Because this means you paid the pain, they get the relief. The government may eat the deficit. You get hit again through taxes or inflation. That's why people say this isn't a mistake, it's a transfer. Money moved up, not down. In one sentence, consumers paid the tariffs through higher prices, but only corporations can legally claim the refunds, leaving regular people completely cut out. You are not getting a check, let me be very clear about what's happening here. When a corporation gets a tariff refund, they do not track down every customer, issue rebates, mail you a check. Corporations don't keep records linking a specific tariff cost to individual shoppers. There is no database that says Jack Cross paid $3 extra for this toaster because of a tariff. So there is no practical or legal way for companies to refund consumer, and they are not required to try. As a result, when refunds happen, the money goes straight into corporate accounts. From there, it's typically used to improve balance sheet, reward shareholders, pay executives, fund stock buybacks, not to lower prices, not to issue rebates, and definitely not to mail checks to consumers. What makes this worse is that this isn't speculation. When asked about tariff refunds, Trump's own Treasury Secretary openly suggested that ordinary Americans won't see that money. That confirms what economists already know about how this system works. Scott Bassett basically admitted it when asked about refunds. The response was smug, dismissive, and revealing. Let's recap the scam. Trump imposes unlawful tariffs, prices go up, you pay more, inflation rises, economy slows, court strikes it down. Corporation demand refunds, corporation get the money. And you get nothing. That is the definition of economic cruelty. This was supposed to fund the government. Remember the original sales pitch: tariffs were imposed to pay for tax cut, reduce the deficit, make America rich, bring back manufacturing, and that was the lie. In reality, the deficit got worse, inflation rose, trade deficit didn't improve, and now the government may actually have to pay the money back, which means what? A bigger hole in the deficit. So not only did tariff fail to fund the government, they may end up costing the government hundreds of billions of dollars. And who eats that loss? You already know the answer. And when confronted with this disaster, what does Trump say? Don't worry, next year. This is textbook Ponzi scheme language. Just wait, it's coming, trust me, the result will show. He said it last year, he said it this year, he'll say it next year. Meanwhile, GDP growth is slowing, inflation is heating back up, PCE is rising, jobs growth is stalling. The economy isn't booming, it's stalling under policy chaos. And Trump's response to losing in court isn't reform, it's revenge. Retaliation politics. Instead of fixing the damage, Trump announced a new 10% global tariff under a different statute with the same legal problems. He also removed the minimis exemption, targeted low-cost imports, hit everyday consumer good. This wasn't policy, this was retaliation, punishing the public because the court told him no. And again, who pays? That's you. The big picture, and this is the pattern. This isn't just about tariff, this is the pattern. First, abuse power, break the law, hurt regular people, protect allies, lose in court, shift the damage downward. Every time, and what makes this movement so revealing is that the mask slipped. When refunds came up, they didn't even pretend you mattered. No talk of consumer relief, no talk of fairness, no talk of accountability. Just we'll fight it, we'll keep the money. And the final conclusion, who this economy is for. So when you hear $175 billion may be refunded, ask the real question. Refunded to whom? Because it's not you, it was never you. You were the shock absorber, the silent payer, the invisible one. And until people connect these dots, until they understand that this isn't incompetence but design, it will keep happening.